Thanks very much, Seamus, and good morning, everyone. So I suppose, as David alluded to, fertiliser price has gone up, and with that, the actual value of the slurries, the farmyard manures that we have on our farms has increased as well with that. And for an example, 1,000 gallons of cattle slurry now is valued at €39 per 1,000 gallons, which is essentially doubled over the last 12-month period. So we have a range of different nutrients within the farmyard that we might have already. Like for example, we have our liquid slurries. We also have as well our soiled water. And I suppose one important thing regarding soiled water is that it can deliver up to 4 units of nitrogen per 1,000 gallons, which is quite substantial and can be used to replace and offset some nitrogen. Typical cattle slurry will deliver around 9 units of nitrogen per 1,000 gallons when it's sprayed with a trailing shoe dribble bar in the springtime. And the fact that soiled water is so watery, it generally gives us higher nitrogen efficiency. About 80% of that nitrogen is utilized, whereas typically with our normal slurry, higher dry matters, they'll give us about 40%. So as well, I suppose when we're looking at our slurries, and how we're going to manage them this year going forward, we have to look at, well, where is the most value we're getting from our slurries? Where has it the most nutrients? And if we look at typical cattle slurry, about 75% at the moment, based on current prices, 75% of the value of cattle slurry is coming from our P&K. So when we're making decisions on our farms, we must be conscious of that. Because a lot at the moment, we might be thinking that we need to use slurry to replace nitrogen, but the value of P&K, we must not forget about that. Also as well, look, there could be some other sources of P&K and nitrogen in the regards of kind of dry manures or farmyard manures, boiler litter, layers litter as well. They also have high in P&K contents and can be used as well to replace nitrogen. So with that in mind, look, the first thing we need to do within our own farms is to know what's in your own slurry. That really is going to be vital, and I think it should be a good target for all Signpost farmers to know exactly what's in their slurry. So typically, within Teagasc, a number of years ago, there was a large study conducted where we looked at and went out onto farms and measured the nutrient contents of slurries, cattle slurries. So standard Teagasc values would be around 9 units of nitrogen per 1,000 gallons for springtime and using less, and about 5 units of P and 32 units of potash. And that's a value that advisors and you would have heard a lot down through the years, okay? Last winter, we went out and we took a cohort of dairy farms in discussion groups, and we measured a large number of slurry samples again, just to get an updated value on that. So again, these are the results came back here. It's listed there as the Teagasc Dairy Gold Shine Program samples. There's 128 samples taken, and you can see, look, they vary slightly from the standard Teagasc values that have been there. But one thing we did as well is we surveyed the farms, and we looked at, what was the different type of slurry coming out of different types of tanks within the yards. So we looked at covered tanks, and you can see here, the slurry dry matter was slightly higher than the average, 7.3 dry matter. Thicker slurry had a slightly higher nutrient content. Then we looked at open towers, and there was 9 samples taken here. Slurry, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash was slightly lower on these. And as we go down to open tanks and lagoons, you can see as the tanks were more open, there was more water coming into them, they were less dilute, and as the more dilute your slurry becomes, the lower the in P&K content will be. So this really kind of shows that, depending on where your slurry is coming from, depending on how it's managed, what level of water is getting into the tank, what can be actually in the slurry tanker when you're driving out to the field can be very different, okay? So that really emphasizes what you need to do. So if you are going to get your slurry tested, these samples cost around 50 to maybe 80 euros a sample. If the slurry, your management of your slurry does not change year to year, these samples can be very relevant for a long number of years maybe 4 or 5 years. Now, when you're going to take your slurry samples, look, first of all, number one is health and safety. Evacuate and ventilate before you agitate, and be very aware of that. Make contact with your local laboratory. There's a large number of labs throughout the country that are testing slurry samples. You can always contact your local advisor to help you with this as well. And the best time to sample your slurry will be kind of in that January, March period, the first time you come to spread slurry, okay? Agitate the slurry, mix it up well, make sure the crust is well mixed with the liquid underneath. Collect maybe a half a litre to a litre of slurry and post it or deliver it to your lab the same day, okay? So also, alternatively to that, you can use a thing called a slurry hydrometer. What the slurry hydrometer does is it measures the dry matter of your slurry. And the dry matter of your slurry will tell you a large amount about N, P, and K content of the slurry. So you can use that. You can also order these slurry hydrometers are not available off the shelf in Ireland at the moment, but they can be easily ordered from a number of suppliers in the UK. Well, a number of farmers have ordered these and are making good use of slurry hydrometers to get a better handle on the nutrient content of their slurry. So so you go and get your slurry tested, and now what changes are you going to make then based on the back of that, okay? So if we just take a standard Teagasc value for a slurry, and we apply 3,000 gallons per acre, this is what it'll deliver in terms of N, P, and K. Our requirement for first cut silage is 100 units of nitrogen, 16 units of P, and 100 units of K. So we can see there that 3,000 gallons to the acre of that type of slurry will deliver pretty much all the P and K that you need. We're topping up then with nitrogen and sulfur. If we look at, say, cover tanks from the current study that we had, it's a similar enough situation. It's delivering all the P and it's delivering the most of the K as well. But when we get into a situation where we have open tanks or lagoons, you can see that there's a lot less nutrients in them. If we're applying the same application rate from an open tank, we're only delivering around, say, 69 units of K, or with a lagoon, it might be only 51 units of K. And that's going to leave us well short in terms of growing our silages. So maybe a thing we might be looking at within our own farms is that if we have covered tanks, that'll generally have good slurry content in it, get them tested, that will be good for silage ground. Whereas maybe more of our open type tanks or our lagoons, might have a better balance in terms of applying our 23 units of nitrogen in that kind of January, February period, as a general recommendation based on if we have good growing conditions at those times of the year. So this shows the power of getting your slurry tested and knowing what's in it, because it's allowing you to match your slurry application rate and where it's coming from to the right field, and also in terms of growing the right crop, whether you're growing a crop of silage or whether you just want to supply a bit of nitrogen for growing a bit of grass at the start of the year. So, and as well, one thing we can't get away of, fuel costs will be higher this year as well. And, sometimes people are reluctant to move slurry to the silage ground. Well, if we just look at it, if we were to put out our full fertiliser requirements for first cut silage with all bag fertiliser, that's going to cost around €205 an acre to do this coming year. And you can see in the red boxes there under each of the slurries, that will be the corresponding cost to do that, where you put out that 3,000 gallons of slurry out on those fields, okay? So you can see, you can significantly reduce the cost of fertilizing your silage crop, and a bias that there will be higher contractor charges to move the slurry. So then as well, something you need to be aware of as well is that, at a price of nitrogen coming in at, say, if it's 23 units of nitrogen coming in at €25, that'll be 50 acres. 50 acres will, if you can replace nice slurry with 50 acres, that will mean that it will reduce your fertilizer bill by €1,250. So in terms of maximizing slurry, so as I said, the P and K value is at the highest value on your slurry. So use your soil samples, have your farm maps, and apply your slurry where it needs the P and K the most: the silage ground, where surplus bales are removed, and the lower index ground. To maximise your slurry nitrogen, we're talking about spreading slurry in the springtime using a trailing shoe or a dribble bar. As you can see, if we move from spreading with a splash plate in the summertime, that will give us 3 units of nitrogen, whereas if we move to the springtime with a trailing shoe or a dribble bar, that will give us 9. That's a 6 unit of nitrogen increase in the value. And like as we can have seen from the trailing shoe and dribble bar, there's a lot less losses of nitrogen associated with that. So as well, in terms of having a plan, so we know we need to get the slurry out in the springtime with a trailing shoe because that will give us the best benefit. But in order to do that, we do have to have a plan going forward and have a plan for next spring regarding how we're going to get that slurry out. So what I would be advising is to use your slurry on the lower covers in the earlier season, that mid-January to first of March period. That will more than enough supply enough nitrogen to grow your grass, as David alluded to, till around the 1st of March. The requirement is not that high. Then after we've raised some of our medium covers first, after that we can start following stock with our slurry to also help us to reduce our fertilizer and our fertilizer on those particular paddocks. So all I'd say is set aside your slurry, strong slurry for the silage ground. Do not lose sight of the fact that the silage ground is the most important place for your slurry for the P&K, and then try to utilize your slurry best to reduce nitrogen then on your grazing ground. So look, with that, I'd like to thank you for this, and I'm going to leave you with a few take-home messages. First of all, look, we need to know what's in our slurry. Get your slurry tested. Adjust then, when you know what's in your slurry, adjust your application rate to suit the crop you're growing, whether it's silage, first cut, second cut, or whether it's just for growing a bit of grass on the grazing block. Apply your slurry to silage and low index paddocks to maximize its P&K value. Apply slurry using the less to maximize its nitrogen value in the springtime. And in order to do that, take out your soil maps, have a plan, know and identify the paddocks that have those low covers, and have an idea of where that slurry needs to go next spring. It'll also be handy to have that ready to hand for a contractor coming into the yard. So thank you very much.